Well, we'll start and we'll get going here. And Missy, would you pray for us tonight?
Sure. Dear God, we're thankful for another good day you've given us and ask that you would bless the message tonight and help it to fall on hearts that want to learn. We pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen. Okay, well, we left off in chapter 34 of Exodus, so if you'll open there again tonight. 34. Like that.
Did you get your calendar?
Hmm?
Did you get your Trump calendar from them? Send it to you?
No.
No?
No, not yet. Maybe it's coming.
Yeah.
That's so fun. Well, we left off at verse 7, and if you remember, God's gonna rewrite the 10 Commandments on these tablets that Moses now he provides. So he cuts these things out, however he did it, whatever they look like, he brings them up. God writes again on the copy that Moses provides, and then you remember at verse 6, as the Lord is passing by him, or passing before Moses. And remember, this is just the neatest thing. It's as if God kind of covers Moses. It sounds like he kind of covers him with his hand, whatever that would be like, and kind of stuffs him in this little crevice in the rock. And then God is just coming near, and it says he's passing by, and then God says something about himself. Remember about this? And he says, Yahweh, I, right? I am what? A God merciful and gracious, slow to anger. Now, remember, this is after, goodness. Remember, we talked about how important that is to keep that in mind, because God could have said anything else. I am quick to anger, hard to please. I can't wait to drop the hammer on you. He didn't say that. And it's as if, here's what I want you to know. And this is right after he inscribes the law again. Here's the law. But as you're trying to follow the law, remember this, because it goes together. He just dropped on Moses' tablets, he etches the law again on them. And then, what he says is this. He doesn't say, now watch out. He says right after that, a God, this is who I am, my heart. Because you got to know, we talked about this, the balance between the heart of God, His grace and law. A God merciful, so He doesn't give us what we deserve, gracious, He gives us what we don't deserve, slow to anger, and abounding. What's abounding? Just more than enough, running over in steadfast love, or loving kindness and faithfulness. Imagine what else could have been written. What else God could have said about himself. But this is what he said. Aren't you happy? Are you happy that's what he said? Okay, and then we're going to pick up 8. And I give more information about verse 7 and where in through the prophet Ezekiel, so that nobody forgot that though God says here, hey, and again, he puts the fear of God into parents, into that generation right there, the first generation of the new country. He says, you blow it, just so you know, I'm gracious, slow to anger, all that is steadfast love. But if y'all blow it, your kids and your grandkids are going to pay for your sins. It's going to kind of follow, and we talked about what that all could have included. But then you get to Ezekiel, and God says, that's not how it is. And either that's not how it was meant to be understood, or that's not how it is now from here on out, because he says now a parent pays for their own sin. The kid, the child, or the grandkid pays for their own. Every single individual, whatever you do, you suffer for it. And it's not that I'm going to punish your kids for your sin. I'll punish them for theirs, I'll punish you for yours. But here at the beginning, it sounds like, I'll punish your kids for your sins. Well, that creates motivation to follow God's laws, doesn't it? How many of you, if God said that today, you sin, I'm going to punish your kids and your grandkids for your sins, how would that affect how you live?
Probably toe the line a little more.
You probably toe the line. Yeah, a lot better, huh? So then it continues, verse 8, and if somebody will read 8 and 9. Julie, would you read 8 and 9, please?
Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. O Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, he said, then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance.
Right, okay. And God said they were stiff-necked. Remember the last chapter? Yes. Oh, this is a stiff-necked people. Moses agrees. Okay, God, yeah, you're right. Yes, we're stiff-necked people. But he's already right there counting on what he just heard from God, and he is counting on that loving kindness, that gracious mercifulness of God, and he's worshiping right there, right? Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth, right, on the ground. Sure, you would too. And he worships God, and then, God, if I found favor in your sight, yes, go with us. Because remember earlier he said, I ain't going with him. Right? You get up and you go to the promised land, but I ain't going with him. Because if I did go with you right now, I need some time to cool off, otherwise I would nuke you. So he says, so y'all go yourself. But here, he says, you know, Moses is just reaffirming, please come with us because you're gracious and loving and all that great. And take us for your inheritance. Did you see this? Although they're stiff-necked people, pardon our iniquity, forgive us our sins, and take us for your inheritance. Well, why would he say that? Take us for your inheritance. What does that mean? Does God need an inheritance? How important is an inheritance out of what you remember of things we've talked about in the past? How important is an inheritance in that day?
Huge.
How many banks existed in that day? How many 401ks existed in that day? What's inheritance? Who gets who's the recipient of inheritance?
Family and wealth.
The son.
Okay, the family wealth. The family wealth is passed down. That's called the inheritance. Upon the
Heirs.
okay, usually it's the oldest kid, but it's
The heir.
that next generation, the heir. So, what a great thing Moses is asking. God, take us. What?
As your
As your
children.
inheritance. That which will carry you through.
That which you can sin for.
Take us for your inheritance. What do your translations say?
In order to safeguard it as you would wealth.
Okay? Two ways this has been understood. Either take us in to be like those that inherit all you got to give, but that doesn't sound like what he's saying. Take us for your inheritance, as your inheritance. Make us the thing that is passed down to you. See us as wealth to you, God. See the benefits of saving our stiff-necked necks and of what we could become for you. See us as your inheritance of the wealth, the benefit, the blessings that could be yours. What a statement. Okay, we continue. Verse 10. Pat, would you read 10?
Then the Lord said, I'm making a covenant with you. Before all your people, I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world.
Ooh.
The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Ezrahites, the Hivets, and the Jesuites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or there will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down the Asher's poles. Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God.
Okay, thank you. Stop right there. Now, okay, so 10. Did you catch what God said? Okay, I hereby make a covenant. I got this pact with you. And he says, in front of all your people, before all of you, as you're watching, I will perform what? What kind?
Awesome one.
Sons of things that have never been performed in all the earth or in any other nation. So far, that's been the case, just delivering them out of Egypt. Right? Now, tell me this. What other nation in the history of the world, as far as you understand, experienced even what Israel did in the Exodus itself? The plagues, the deliverance, and all that. The parting of the Red Sea. How many other nations literally walked between water?
Egypt.
No.
Egypt for a little bit.
No, yeah,
Then it was
only briefly.
Only briefly. All right, so
Came so close.
how many other nations have something like a Bible? With the stories of all these prophets and all the miracles that we've seen in what's in the Old Testament. All that God is doing for the Israelites. I mean, everything, you got the folks who are going to be marching around Nineveh, and then, Jericho, and then all the walls fall down just because they're marching around. All those kind of things. There's going to be innumerous miracles. No nation has a record of its God doing such miraculous things. Well, again, whatever God says is going to happen, and it's happened, and here it is. So here's the beginning of it, where God says, ain't no other nation in the history of the world, never has and never will, see what you're all going to see. And we've got the record of it right here. And the greatest miracle of all, God's going to make a personal appearance in the person of Jesus and visit the earth. God himself is going to walk the earth in the person of Jesus. What other nation did God decide to do it? The Japanese? Russian? God through them. Even though they're stiff-necked people. And the whole record is they're still stiff-necked and rebellious. But God still keeps his promises. Because the whole thing is based on God's faithfulness. That's what God said. Don't forget, I'm giving you the laws, but don't forget Moses. I'm a God. I'm merciful and gracious. I'm slow to anger. I'm abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. And they're going to find that out. That it's the character of God that's unchanging that keeps God's miracles in the picture constantly throughout the history of Israel.
Yes.
Though Israel's stiff-necked and they are idolatrous over and over again. That's our God. And that's your God. That's why he keeps working in your life. He still uses you despite who you are. Because it's about who God is, not who you are.
So that home and came close.
There you go.
Isn't this great? That's our God. Don't forget that. Okay, so, and then he continues, verse 11 as Pat was reading. Observe everything that I command you, and I'm going to drive out before you, and again, we talked about this last week. This is the second time he says this, I'm going to use you. I'm going to do some things, but I'm going to use you to kick out who should not be in the land. And he says, because if you don't, what's going to become a snare? It's their false gods. Look at 13. Again, you shall tear down their altar. So when you eventually get in there, and it's not going to be for another 40 years under Joshua's leadership, but when you get in there, here's what I want you to do. Now, I want you to tell this. Think about this for a moment. ISIS. I understand why ISIS has, when it's gone into Nineveh today, ancient Nineveh, and has gone into Syria, and it's gone into all these places where there's been all these ancient, sites and temples to pagan gods. Now, you and I, as Christians, we know there's nothing real to them, except there are real demons that were behind them in the day when people actually believed in them and sacrificed to them. They were in bondage to them. Okay? And we know, and I think it's interesting to keep those as artifacts. To be able to look at them and say, wow, look at this. It's old, it's interesting, it is part of real history and of what people did. And it's important to know this is when people went astray. Here's some of the false gods that people worshipped in ancient history. ISIS goes in, and according to their belief and their God, they're going to beat to dust everything that's there, which is why you see them with their sledgehammers, and they're trying to destroy any semblance of any foreign religion or any godless religion in their understanding. Well, here's what God tells them to do. As soon as you get in there, the land of the Canaanites, etc., he says you're going to break down their altars, break their pillars, cut down their sacred poles, for you shall worship no other God. Well, that's what ISIS is trying to do. They don't think anybody should worship any other God besides Allah. I get it. The problem is, Allah is the devil himself. Okay? So, and he says, because the Lord, whose name is jealous, capital J, okay? He's saying, here's one of my names too. In this name, my name is jealous. Because I'm a jealous God. And jealous, right? The difference between jealousy and envy.
Jealous is what you own, envy is somebody else wants.
Envy is when you want what somebody else has. Jealous is when you want back what belongs to you. He says, I'm a jealous God. My name is not envy. What doesn't God own? So he says, my name is jealous. You belong to me. Come back here. So, and that's going to be what's going to happen in the future. So he says, so don't follow these false gods. Now, break down these altars, these sacred what? Columns, pillars, and poles. Do you remember what those were? Asher poles. Okay, the god Asherah or Asheroth, a contemporary, almost like call it the female god version of Baal. Okay, gods that these groups worshipped, evil as can be, and they were fertility gods. Asherah, in particular, was the goddess of fertility. And talked about in the past what we know about their ancient worship services. You do not find them in the Bible, but you find them in extra-canonical texts. You find them just in other pieces of antiquity out there. And I don't even want to repeat what they would do in what they would call a worship service. But to give you an example, when it says the sacred poles, and you see this, if you remember, you know your Bible, time and time again, it would talk about good kings that would take down the sacred poles, or the Asherah poles. Over and over again, you'd see this. And you'd see somebody puts them back up, somebody takes them down. Bad kings would put them back up, or allow pagan religion to put them back up. They were big phallic images. Somebody carved, think of a totem pole, but they carved it in the shape of a schnitzel, and put it in the ground, and then they'd walk around it and worship it and hug it and do all that stuff. And there actually are two that exist today. One is on the island of Molokai, and I've seen it back in one of the Hawaiian Islands. And a friend of ours, David Tipson Waxer, he went over to visit him one time, and he took me up there. And the other one's in Corinth. It's out in Greece today. But he says, and he takes me to the same, and this one is stone. This would be one of the pillars, and it's creepy. And there were little gifts on it and around it, because some of the Hawaiian people still believe in that and worship this thing. That was part of a pagan group that they brought that kind of thing in. They were from Tahiti, when the Tahitians came to the Hawaiian Islands and taught the Hawaiians a totally different belief system than what they had. And so there were these little tea leaf offerings, kind of all tied up, and they give it to this thing. They pray around it and pray to get pregnant. Do you think it'll work? Okay, they're wasting their time. All right, so
How large is it?
yeah, it's interesting. Well, I'll tell you, this stone one, to tell you, you know what details? It's about yay tall, and it goes from about there to about there, and it was carved out of stone, lava rock. It's just a creepy thing, and when you walk up to it, you know exactly what it is. Yeah, it did not come out of a volcano that way.
Is schnitzel a Hawaiian word?
Schnitzel is Hawaiian. It's very funny. Okay, so. All right. So we continue. Again, this is God who says, okay, I'm making a covenant with you. So 15, you shall not make a covenant with them. Okay, what I'm making with you, don't do with them, the inhabitants of the land. For when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and that's sacrificing their infants and animals, someone among them will invite you. Hey, why don't you come to church with us today? You know, their kind of church. People are going to invite you into their service. Come see what we do. And you will eat of the sacrifice. Before you know it, you're going to be starting to do what they're doing. And you will take wives from among their daughters for your sons, and their daughters who prostitute themselves to their gods will make your sons also prostitute themselves to their gods. He is saying, they're going to rub off on you. And did they?
Yes.
Time and time again. If you know your Old Testament, time and time again. Because the Israelites never fully ousted these people from the land. They kept them around and would time to time make pacts with them, and so that they wouldn't go to war, and my goodness, you know the story. So, okay, we'll continue. Let's get 7:30. So he continues, and it was almost like, wow, are we kind of back in the Ten Commandments? Or God just throwing some more things. Just here's some heavy reminders of certain things. What's verse 17 say? You shall not make? Cast idols. What's the second commandment? You shall not make for yourself any image, graven image, any false idol. Okay, so he's saying it again. Verse 18, you shall keep the festival of unleavened bread. When did that one start? Back to the Exodus. Okay. And I'm going to tell you there's three festivals that he's going to talk about.
Say that about Exodus again, the unleavened bread.
So that was to commemorate what happened the night when God said, the night of what we call the Passover, I'm going to pass through. The angel of death is going to pass through all of the land of Egypt. And whatever house does not have the blood of a lamb on the door, I won't pass over it. I will pass over the houses with the blood of a lamb on the door, safety behind the blood of a lamb. But I'm going to go into every house. I'm going to kill the firstborn of every household. And then God said, and they're going to get so upset, they're going to put two and two together, that your presence in the land and my protection of you and working on your behalf, they're going to realize the connection, and they're going to kick you out. They're going to move you out so fast. They're going to stuff your pockets full of money so that you don't return. He says, and you won't even have time to let bread rise. So that's when he said, so don't even put yeast in your bread. You don't even have time to make it rise. but you need to sack lunch for the trip. You need to picnic lunch for the trip. So he says, because you're leaving your food. You're going out into the wilderness. You need to make some food really quick. So you're going to eat that lamb that you just killed, paint its blood on the door, and all these other little items you're going to have. And then God says, and by the way, he says this on the same night. By the way, Moses, what I'm having you do tonight, I'm going to have you do every single year, but in a week-long festival. Just to let you know, I'm going to tell you now at the beginning. And then I want you to do it every single year, forever, to always remember how I protected you. So now he brings it up again. This is very important because, think about how important annual observances are about things. Isn't it nice to have Christmas? It's nice to remember in a very special way, a festival way, the incarnation of God. The God came to earth, born as a baby. How important is that? What if we didn't do that every year? Just think of what you'd miss and just lack of focus on that. Easter, the resurrection. There's certain things we want to remember. If we don't commemorate Thanksgiving every year, how often does your mind really turn towards what God did to preserve a people who first came to the country and, etc.
So, isn't Easter really a pagan holiday?
Yeah, but I mean, when I say, that's what I mean, the resurrection is something we might call, but not Easter per se. So, he's gonna talk about several feasts here in this chapter, and let me see, somebody read for me, please. And I might stop you as we go, but somebody read 18, and just keep reading, and I'm going to stop you as you go. And Phil, would you do that?
The feast of unleavened bread you will keep. 7 days you will eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, in the appointed time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib you came out from Egypt.
Abib that would be March and April for us in our calendar. Keep going.
All that open the womb are mine, and every male firstborn among your livestock, whether ox or sheep. But the firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And if you will not redeem him, then you shall break his neck. All the firstborn of your sons you shall redeem. Stop you there.
Very interesting. Not completely clear about everything in it and why the donkey. Some commentators have guessed what that all means. I will simply say that God's saying, I saved your firstborns. And so that you remember that, here's an ongoing reminder, every firstborn of everything that's born. Because it wasn't just humans, it was all, it's amazing what died, right, back in the Exodus. But he says, this is what you're going to pay me back for keeping yours alive. I own the firstborn. Now what is God going to do with it? Do we know?
He doesn't need it, it's to show our hearts. What we give to him tells him where our heart is.
Okay. Now, remember, there's all these threads in the Bible. What's the most important thing to God? What does God love more? God the Father love more than all of us? His firstborn. His glory, but his firstborn son. He gives his firstborn son, ultimately to us. And this is what he does. He does these things. He goes, give me what's important to you. Your very first kid. Remember, you don't have any other kid. Your very first kid. How important is your first kid when you have a kid? There's nothing like your firstborn, because it's just your firstborn. He goes, that's the one I want. And is God going to do something? Or you're pledging it to God? You're definitely, you're agreeing with God that the first thing that came from us, from you and your wife or you and your husband, is God's. And there's, I guess the reminder that's built in there is how precious that life is, and the remembrance of the protecting of your firstborns back during the Exodus. So the feast relates back to that miraculous night. Keep going.
Last line of 20.
Last line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And none shall appear before me empty-handed.
What does that mean?
You have to offer something.
That's what it says.
No one shall appear to me or before me empty-handed. What does that relate to?
He demands a sacrifice.
Okay? Probably relates back to the firstborn. And here's something else. The sacrificial system is about to be underway. There's some things you got to give up. Not your people, not your actual firstborn child, but he just said, firstborn of your flocks, etc. That's mine. That's going to morph very quickly, we'll see, into what becomes part of the religious system and call it the central clearinghouse. That he's going, I want your first fruits. The first of everything, don't spend it on yourself, give it to me, and it's going to be interesting. This priest system develops, and all of a sudden the nation brings in fruits, the first, that come off the tree, off of the fields, out of the livestock. We're going to bring those to church, we're going to give them to God. First thing that we give, the first check in our house that we write is to the church. Then we pay our bills. We give our stuff to God, and then we're going to see, down the road what God's going to do with it. Very interesting. Okay, keep going.
Verse 21. 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. And you shall observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in the year all your men shall appear before the Lord God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before you and enlarge your borders. Neither will any man covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in the year. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, nor shall the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover be until morning. The first of the firstfruits of your land you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Then the Lord said to Moses, write these things, for according to the tenor of these words I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Now it was so when Moses came down from Mount Sinai and the 2 tablets
We'll
of the
stop you
testimony.
there. Thank you. Okay, so let's pull some things from there. Verse 23, 3 times a year, all of your males, the men are going to do this. They're going to come to me, and it's going to be wherever God's going to be, wherever that tabernacle is going to be, and it'll end up being in Jerusalem, down the road. But I want to just bring the men, and they're going to bring with them 3 different things during these feasts. It's like, call it pre-agricultural, post-agricultural, the end of the harvest, and remembering the Passover. It's a sacrifice, and it's a demonstration that you rely on me, and you're thankful to me. You see me, you credit me with all that you have. To keep you focused, and to keep your worshiping on God. And then also he throws in this, you shall not boil a kid or a baby goat in its mother's milk.
I've always wondered about
Why
that.
would you do that anyway?
Why would you do that anyway?
That's
So,
nasty.
I worked with a Jewish kid, so he was on my crew, and we went out, and, so right off the bat, first thing in the morning, I go, okay, I know you're kosher, that's no problem, everything will be fine. So we go out, we work all day, and we're like really close to supper time, so I go, let's just swing by my house, I got a bunch of pizzas in the fridge, we can have them for dinner. So I served the kid
Meat and cheese.
sausage pizza
Uh-oh.
after promising him that we would eat kosher. So he had the kid, this is where they say you can't have a cheeseburger. That's why they can't eat cheese on the meat, is what he said.
No.
And I served him pork too, so.
A bacon
Didn't even
cheeseburger
Didn't even
to a
think
Jew.
about it. Yeah, he ate it,
It's awesome. Well, it is interesting, And as best I can figure, it's because part of the religious practice of the Canaanites is that they cooked baby goats in its mother's milk, and it was a fertility thing. That was part of their worship. And the Israelites weren't to take what's intended to promote life, goat's milk, and use it to destroy life. Because how much does a baby goat need mom's milk? Okay, that's intended for that baby's life. But in their religion, I mean, there's a sickness, it's a little bit macabre. We're going to take the mother's milk that baby should be sucking on. We're going to boil the baby in its mother's milk. We're not going to feed the goat, baby goat. We're going to boil it and kill it. So God goes, you ain't going to do that.
Good for God.
Good for God. You know? But again, this is, in context, Asherah, all this fertility stuff, Baal, some of their worship, I'm just telling you. And this is real stuff. In their worship practices, their worship services, there would be a man and a woman, buck naked, on the altar, having sex. Everybody's watching in their temple. And it leads to an orgy. They would have a mom who's ready to give birth. She'd give birth on the altar. A live birth right there. The priest would immediately take that baby, put it up in the hands of Molech, which is, and this big, it's a representation of their god, one of their gods. And one of these had been unearthed, and I think it was about 30 years ago. And an ancient site is unearthed, and they calculate about 20,000 infant remains in this pit below where this Molech, or Chemosh, same god, from two different of these the Canaanites and the mosquito bites and all that. And there'd be these hands like this, these big bronze hands, and a fire's underneath it, and the priest puts this brand new baby on the hands, these big brass hands, and it literally is burnt to death, goes up in flames right there, and as it turns to smoke, they believed the smoke rising up sends it to their God, and there's their offering. God says, smoke these guys. When you go into the land, you drive them out, because this is what they're like. That's their worship services. Yeah, you drive them out. He goes, if you don't, you're going to start doing this stuff. And they did do that stuff. Which is why you find in there were kings that actually were part of the system. And led the nation in sacrificing their children. Okay, so. Okay, goat's milk.
Did the mothers do this willingly?
You know, it sure looks like it. But, you know, I'm just put it this way. I would have been tempted to have thought some years ago, there's no way the moms did that willingly. They had to have been forced, but then I think of Islam. And I think of the mothers, and you've seen the videos perhaps, who are as proud as can be because they've strapped a suicide vest on their little child and sent them out to go walk right up near our soldiers and then detonate.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing what human beings could become.
Well, when they listen to Satan.
Thank you. And there it is.
What?
There it is. When they listen to Satan. Because there it is. Again, the salvation in Islam is death. The only guarantee into paradise, the only guarantee is if you die in the midst of jihad. That's the guarantee. Otherwise, you're just hoping you did enough good when you get there and that Allah will accept you. Otherwise, if you die, you sacrifice yourself, you suicide bomb or whatever, you're killed as you're killing the infidels. That's the guarantee of the paradise for you and your family. So, and you know, who would be behind a thing like that? God's not behind that kind of a thing.
No, he's not behind the murder of the little babies
He's not
in
behind,
the womb either.
no, he's not, definitely not behind New York's recent ruler. Phil.
So that Islamic mother is doing it as an act of worship to God.
Yes.
As an act of worship to their God.
In New York, a mom can do it as an act of worship
To
to
herself.
herself.
Sure.
Well, did they put a pink thing up?
Yeah, oh, amazing.
It should have been
They're gonna
red.
name that yet.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
it
amazing.
would.
Did you hear with the governor of Virginia?
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen
Even
that?
after birth,
After birth.
No way.
yes.
You just make it
Bring it out.
comfortable.
Uh,
Yeah.
And we'll
have a
discuss
life
it.
comfortable.
And they-
And he said, treat it with kindness and make it warm and comfortable was the word.
And then decide.
And then sit there and discuss with the woman what she wanted to do with that child at that time. Abort it and kill it, or keep it, or whatever.
That's not abortion, that's murder.
And what was his point?
That's
He's
the
just
thing
trying
for
to legislate
Virginia.
it.
That's a
Bring
new
it
law they're looking at.
It's the next step.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta
the
go
next
bigger
step.
than New York now.
Infanticide.
Infanticide.
He's the governor, but he's a
Yeah,
doctor.
he won up New York. New York said, well, the presenting part, as long as it's not the head, and you can still abort, but,
He said, well, take it out.
here, we'll bring it out, we'll make it comfortable, and we'll talk about it with the young mother and.
And then maybe
decide
kill it
what
right
to
there
do.
if you want.
Oh, yeah.
It's been born, it's alive.
It's
Right.
a live
Right.
birth murder,
Isn't that murder?
yes.
Oh,
It's
Lord.
murder,
Not if you pass a law that says it's.
Oh, Lord. It's the days of Hitler.
yeah.
And what follows that, this kind of stuff? Oh, my.
Killing old people.
Yeah, old people, anybody that
Yeah,
needs
anybody
deficiencies,
in there.
anybody that they deem needs to
Christians,
go.
yeah. Whoever they deem needs to go, and that's,
A slippery slope.
That's why you don't need an.
As in the days of Noah.
Yeah.
That's why we gotta be speaking loudly
yeah.
and clearly.
That's right. You better. And, yeah. Ooh, we can go there. Well, okay. Wow. Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Gosh, do you remember, by the way, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? Pictures were passing around. They had the Arch of Baal. Do you remember that in New York?
Yeah.
Somebody erected
Yep.
they like recreated the ancient this ancient entry
Yep.
into the temple of Baal. They recreated it and they stuck it in, it's in New York somewhere.
Central Park.
Central Park?
Yeah.
Okay, and when I saw that, I went, either this is just, I don't know, some wacko, some individual's tribute to Baal, or they're in their belief, oh, this is, something from history, it's kind of interesting, let's put it up here, or
Ramping it up.
Actually,
ramping it up, and I'm thinking, did anybody do their homework when somebody wanted to do that? Did they even look into what that was and who Baal was in history,
They don't.
and then allow and grant? Some city council had to allow this thing, or Parks and Recs or something had to allow this thing to be put up. And when that happened, right there, I thought, uh-oh. To do that, was that a formal invitation for the devil himself, who Jesus describes
Obviously
as
it
Baal?
was.
Now,
Um,
he lives in New York.
Yeah.
They
So-
knew exactly
They knew
what
it.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they knew. Yeah, those that do know exactly what it was,
Mhm.
right?
Just like that
What's an
statue of
atheist care?
Baphomet with the children that Ohio put up.
Say it again.
That statue of Baphomet with the two little boy and little girl sitting in front of him that the Satanists put up in
Oh,
Ohio or something.
isn't that amazing?
And yet we're taking down history.
Doug Noyes and I were on our behind the curtain for this weekend. We talked about New York. He brought up recently that at the Sundance Film Festival, Hail Satan.
Yes.
Did you read about this?
Yes.
Yeah. Was the actual film that got a standing ovation
Oh,
when it was there, and what it did, it showed Satanists, these wonderful, loving people. They
yeah.
do sock drives. They go door to door, collect canned foods and all these wonderful things supposedly, and then they contrast themselves with Christians and like show how terrible Christians are, and that they're the ones that should be literally just just segmented off from society. and people gave us the standing up at the Sundance Film Festival.
Whoa.
And he was reading it from the news. Where are we going? What's happening with our day? Well, read the book of Revelation, will tell you. So, all right. We've got a few more minutes. And, okay, here comes the shiny face part.
Bring the light in real close?
Yeah, we can bring that light in. So let's go 29 to the end. And who's got the Bible there on in there? Brian, would you read that, please?
Sure. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant, because he had spoken with the Lord. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, so Aaron and all the leaders of the community came back to him, and he spoke to them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near him, and he gave them all the commands the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. When Moses finished speaking to them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what had been commanded, they saw that his face was radiant. Then Moses would put the veil back over his face until he went in to speak with the Lord.
So anytime somebody's face is shining,
Hey, that's how my kids look all the time. Get them a veil.
I don't know what an effect that was, but okay. So to close, this is such an interesting passage, but what do you take from it? Moses, when he was done with this special meeting from God, when he returns, he's glowing. You know, you spend a lot of time out in the sun, you get a sunburn. It just shows you spend a lot of time in the sun. I don't know what this looked like, this glowing, radiant thing, but it was so bright. We understand the people were saying, hey, it's actually kind of hard to look at you. Can you kind of put something over your face? Yeah, turn your face down. Isn't that interesting? But if this really happened, and it did, then when God came that close to somebody, because he came close, didn't he? Moses was literally like reflecting, radiating what he absorbed in the presence of God, who is light, who is glorious. And, you know, and if you spend actual time with God, and that just confirms God actually broke into the material world, God the Father, in whatever way, and is just, even though he's got Moses protected, Moses still was absorbing some of that radiation, whatever, and he is glowing. And I say it's an amazing thought. And it looks like it lasts for a while. And God, you know, Moses would go into the tent, meet with God, and then come back out and have to put that veil on, because that, again, that meeting with God was so intimate, so close, and Moses is reflecting on it. Now, what do you think? Folks, if you, imagine, use your imagination, if you have that kind of a call it a devotional time with God in the morning, where literally God breaks through the material realm, I don't know what you would be feeling at the time. But what you're exposed to in the glory of God, would it not transform you? Would it not have an effect on your physical frame, your skin itself? I wonder what Moses felt like.
Awesome.
Sunburn. What did he feel like? And Phil.
So did Adam and Eve have the same glow?
Yeah, did Adam and Eve have the same glow?
Is that when they realized they were naked when the glow went away?
When the glow? That's a good question. Yeah, did they realize that they were naked when the glow went away? I mean, I would. Yeah, that's a great statement, Phil. Yeah, I would assume Adam and Eve would have been glowing like that. because of how often they walk with God in the garden. But all this is to say, as we find out later in the scriptures, there has not been anyone since the days of Moses whom God had a relationship with like that, face to face. Face to face.
Well, in the world to come, it says there's gonna be no need for light, because God will be the light. Will we, be that, glow like that too?
Yeah, we'll probably be going like that in heaven. I admit that's part of our glorified state. I mean, that's going to be quite interesting. I mean, I guess we would, wouldn't we? We'll be having that glow. But so there's a foretaste of things to come in the world to come, and we're done with 34. And I know you've heard stories, you've heard sermons on that ad nauseum. And not to try to tweak that or be too redundant, but isn't it true? There's got to be some type of a reflection a reflection of God that does come off of us. It may not be that physical thing, but you know what it's like when people do look at you and go, boy, you're different, and I want what you got. And they can't exactly describe it. And, we need to hear a lot more of that, don't we, in our day?
Yes.
We should all be hearing people say to us, there's something about you. You have something I don't have. And I think back, we talked about Etal, that story where God did those miraculous things with that tribe. And in that documentary, there were some of the Indians, or the natives, that would come up to the missionaries and they said, you have a light in your eyes. Our eyes are dark. They said, when we look into each other's eyes, all we see is black, darkness. Not because they have brown eyes. Literally like a darkness, an emptiness. Well, they're not saved. And they're not reborn. They're not spiritually reborn. And they saw that. But in the missionaries, they say, you have a light in your eyes. How do we get that? How many of you have spotted Christians before? Anywhere, here or in another country. And you start to talk to them, you just see something, you go, and some of you might have been so bold to go, are you a Christian? I knew it! And all of a sudden you're talking like that. How many of you have that experience? Yeah. It's a regular thing, You just know it. You go, you can tell. Because there's something different. They are spiritually reborn. And you can't be spiritually reborn and not really show it somehow. So it's a beautiful thing. Okay. I want to thank you all once again. It is always inspiring to me that you would come out even on a cold night like this and travel from however long you have traveled. The Wagners, they come from pretty darn far. But thank you for coming and giving a night again to look at the Word of God together. I trust there's always something new, encouraging for you because you've made the journey. I want to remind you, it is this Sunday, right? When you start, Mike?